The chamber was enormous, built from materials that existed before most civilizations had even learned to make fire. Floating in the void of space, the Council Station had witnessed the rise and fall of empires across 3 million years. Today, its halls buzzed with tension as representatives from 200 species gathered for the first time in 3 centuries. Day One sat quietly in the human section, his gray-streaked hair the only sign of his age. His uniform was simple, dark blue with no medals or decorations. Beside him, Hana reviewed data on her tablet, her fingers moving quickly across the screen. They had traveled for 6 months to reach this place. Knowing what question would be asked, the Vrelian Prime stood at the center of the circular chamber, its crystalline body refracting light into rainbow patterns across the walls. Its voice echoed like wind through caverns as it spoke. "We convene the Grand Council to establish order. Too long have borders been disputed. Too long have species claimed what others believe is theirs. Today, we shall answer the fundamental question that shapes our galaxy." Around the chamber, delegates shifted in their seats. Some species sat on benches, others floated in containment fields, and a few existed as pure energy contained in specialized cylinders. The diversity of life was staggering, yet all had come for the same reason. "Each civilization will declare their claim," the Vrelian Prime continued. "Speak your borders. Speak your rights. Speak your rule over the territories you hold." The Therosian representative rose first, a massive creature covered in armored scales. Its species had conquered 17 star systems in the past century through brutal military campaigns. The Therosian Empire claims dominion over all systems within the Outer R region. Our fleets number in the thousands. Our soldiers are trained from birth. Any who challenge our borders will face total annihilation. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Some species nodded in approval. Others hissed in their own languages, clearly threatened by such bold claims. One by one, civilizations stood and made their declarations. The Keltharian Confederation claimed mining rights to 6 nebulae. The Orinth Collective demanded exclusive access to wormhole networks in the southern quadrants. Ancient species spoke of territories they had held for millions of years, their claims backed by history rather than force. Hours passed. Day One listened to each declaration, his expression never changing. Hana occasionally leaned close to whisper updates about fleet positions or resource allocations she was tracking. He would nod slightly, then return his attention to the speakers. The Vrelian Prime's gaze finally settled on the human delegation. The species known as humanity has been silent throughout these proceedings. You have colonized 73 worlds across multiple sectors. You maintain defensive installations and merchant routes. Yet you have made no territorial claims in any official capacity. The Council demands your answer. What does humanity claim to rule? The entire chamber fell quiet. 200 civilizations turned their attention to the small human section. Many had dismissed humanity as a young species, barely 4,000 years removed from their first written language. Their technology was adequate, but not exceptional. Their military forces were present, but not overwhelming. They seemed unremarkable in every way. Day One stood slowly. He was not a tall man, and compared to many species in the chamber, he looked almost fragile. He placed his hands behind his back and looked around the vast space, meeting the eyes of delegates from across the galaxy. Some stared back with curiosity, others with contempt, a few with barely concealed hostility. The silence stretched. 10 seconds. 20, 30 dot, then Day One sat back down. The chamber erupted. Delegates shouted in dozens of languages. The Therosian representative slammed its clawed appendage against its bench, creating a thunderous boom. The Vrelian Prime's crystalline structure vibrated with what might have been anger or confusion. "This is an outrage. A delegate from the Corthan Assembly shrieked. The council demands an answer. You cannot simply refuse to participate. The Vrelian Prime raised one of its limbs, and the chamber quieted, though tension still crackled in the air. Ambassador Day 1, your silence is noted, but not acceptable. The purpose of this gathering is to establish clear boundaries and prevent future conflicts. Your refusal to declare humanity's position threatens the stability we seek to create. Day 1 stood again, this time speaking in a calm, measured voice. I did not refuse. I provided humanity's answer. Silence is not an answer, the Tharosian representative growled. It is cowardice or disrespect. Choose which accusation you prefer, human. Hana's hand moved slightly toward a device at her belt, but Day 1 placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. She relaxed, but kept her eyes on the Tharosian. Perhaps humanity needs time to formulate a proper response, suggested a delegate from one of the more diplomatic species. They are young. They may not understand the gravity of this council. We understand perfectly, Day 1 replied. However, the question asked requires careful consideration. I request a recess of 7 days. At the end of that time, humanity will provide a complete answer to the Council's question. The Vrelian Prime structure pulsed with light. 7 days is acceptable. But know this, humanity. If your answer is deemed insufficient, or if you refuse to participate in the order we seek to establish, there will be consequences. Economic sanctions at minimum, possibly territorial restrictions, or military action, the Tharosian added with what sounded like satisfaction. Your species holds valuable worlds. If you cannot justify your claim to them, others may decide those worlds would be better served under different management. Several other aggressive species voiced their agreement. Day 1 noticed which ones spoke and which remained silent. Hana was recording everything, creating a detailed profile of each civilization's stance and temperament. 7 days, Day 1 confirmed. The council will have its answer. As the session concluded and delegates began to disperse, Hana leaned close to Day 1. They think we're weak. Half of them are already planning to test us. I know, Day 1 said quietly, watching the Tharosian representative confer with several allied species. That's exactly what we needed them to think. Sir, the Tharosians have 16 battle fleets. Intelligence suggests they've been looking for an excuse to expand into our territory for years. If they move during this recess, they will move, Day 1 interrupted. So will others. 7 days is more than enough time for the aggressive species to reveal themselves, and more than enough time for us to provide the answer they're not expecting. Hana looked at her commander, seeing something in his eyes that she had seen before during their military campaigns. Not anger or fear, but absolute certainty. Orders, sir? Send the signal, Day 1 said. All quiet protocols. Full implementation. As they left the chamber, not a single delegate noticed the slight smile that crossed Day 1's face. The question had been asked. Soon, the galaxy would understand that humanity had answered it. The moment they chose to remain silent, the Tharosian war fleet moved through space like a predator stalking prey. 16 massive warships, each larger than a city, their weapons charged and ready. Fleet Commander Thorax had received his orders within hours of the council session ending. 3 human colonies, lightly defended, valuable resources. Easy targets. All ships report ready for combat, his tactical officer announced. The humans have only 7 defensive platforms around the primary colony. Our intelligence shows minimal military presence. Thorax clicked his mandibles in satisfaction. These young species never learn. They come to the council with empty hands and expect to be taken seriously. We will teach them the price of weakness. All ships, prepare to attack on my command. The fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, home to 20,000 human colonists. Sensors immediately swept the area, identifying the human defensive platforms and 3 small patrol ships. As expected, Thorax said. Minimal resistance. Target the orbital platforms first, then the military vessels. Leave the colony intact. We'll claim it as the Rosian territory within the day. But as his weapons officer prepared to fire, something strange happened. The human ships didn't move to intercept. They didn't power up weapons or raise shields. They simply vanished from sensors. Report, Thorax demanded. Where did they go? Unknown, Commander. They were there, and then they weren't. No energy signature, no residual particles, nothing. Scan again. They must have cloaking technology. The sensors swept the system 3 times. Nothing. The human ships had simply ceased to exist as far as their instruments could detect. No matter, Thorax decided. They fled. Proceed with the attack. Before the weapons officer could comply, alarms erupted across the flagship's bridge. Commander, we're detecting massive power fluctuations across the fleet. Ship-to-ship communications are failing. Navigation systems are experiencing interference. From what source? Thorax roared. There's nothing out there. On the other side of the galaxy, Captain Taeyang sat in the command chair of the Silent Echo, a ship that existed in records only as a civilian research vessel. In reality, it was one of humanity's most advanced stealth craft, capable of remaining undetected even at close range. Target fleet has entered the Kepler 442 system as predicted, his sensor officer reported. They're experiencing the first phase of system disruption. Taeyang nodded calmly. Maintain position. No active scans. We observe only. Sir, should we not defend the colony? The colony is in no danger, Taeyang replied. Trust the protocol. Back in Therosian space, Fleet Commander Thorax watched in growing confusion as his mighty armada began to lose cohesion. Ships reported navigation errors, sending them off course. Communication systems degraded to the point where coordinating an attack became impossible. Weapons targeting systems malfunctioned, unable to lock onto the now empty coordinates where the human platforms had been. This is impossible, his tactical officer said. Every system is failing simultaneously, but there's no attack, no enemy action we can detect. Full retreat, Thorax ordered. Return to Therosian space immediately. But when the ships attempted to engage their faster-than-light drives, they found themselves unable to calculate safe jump coordinates. Something was interfering with their ability to navigate, stranding them in the human system. Aboard a civilian freighter 3 light-years away, Captain G1 was delivering supplies to a mining station when her sensors detected something extraordinary. A Therosian war fleet, one of the largest assemblies of military power in known space, simply disappeared from her long-range scans. What just happened? Her co-pilot asked, staring at the display where 16 capital ships had been moments before. I don't know, G1 said quietly. They were there, and now they're gone. No explosion, no debris field, nothing. She immediately sent a priority message to Human Command, though something told her they already knew. Admiral Yunmi stood in a facility that officially didn't exist, buried 3 kilometers beneath the surface of a barren moon. Holographic displays surrounded her, showing real-time data from across the galaxy. She watched as multiple situations developed simultaneously. The Rosian fleet contained in Kepler 442, one officer reported. They're attempting to regain control of their systems, but making no progress. Korthan assault force experiencing similar disruptions in the Deneb sector, another said. They've lost contact with their home fleet. Vrelian reconnaissance ships reporting sensor anomalies in 7 different systems. Junmi studied the displays with the calm of someone who had planned for every possibility. Any casualties? None, ma'am. All protocols are non-lethal as specified. The targets are confused and stranded but unharmed. Good. Maintain current operations. I want every aggressive movement during this recess documented and countered, but not a single life taken. They need to understand what we could do, not what we will do. Across the galaxy, dozens of similar scenarios played out. Species that had decided to test humanity's resolve during the 7-day recess found their military forces suddenly unable to function. Some lost navigation, others communications. Still others found their weapon systems offline. In every case, the effect was the same. They were rendered harmless without a single shot being fired. Intelligence operative Quan watched from his position, embedded deep in Therosian territory. He had spent 3 years building his cover as a trader, earning the trust of locals while gathering information. Now, he transmitted encrypted reports back to human command. Local response to fleet disappearance is panic mixed with confusion, he sent. They have no explanation for what happened. Some military leaders are demanding immediate retaliation, but they can't retaliate against an enemy they can't find. Others are beginning to question whether attacking humanity was wise. The response from command came quickly. Continue observation. Report any escalation. Do not reveal yourself under any circumstances. Quan smiled slightly. He had no intention of revealing himself. He was far too interested in watching how this played out. On the council station, delegates gathered in informal groups, sharing information and rumors. Word of the disappearances had spread quickly, though no one could agree on what was happening. 17 species have lost contact with military assets, a Korthan representative said nervously. Battle fleets, reconnaissance vessels, even orbital defense platforms. They're simply gone. The humans must have some weapon we don't know. About a Therosian diplomat suggested, though his voice lacked conviction. But there's been no attack, another delegate pointed out. No energy weapons discharge, no missile launches, no evidence of any hostile action. The ships just vanish. Some later reappear in different locations, crews unharmed, but unable to explain what happened. In his quarters, Day 1 reviewed reports with Hana. 3 days had passed since the council session. The galaxy was beginning to understand that something fundamental had changed, though they didn't yet grasp what. 42 separate incidents, Hana reported. Every species that made aggressive moves toward our territory or voiced support for territorial seizures has been affected. The others remain untouched. And the pattern? Day 1 asked. Becoming clear to the more intelligent observers. The Vrelian Prime has requested a private meeting with you. Several diplomatic species have sent informal messages asking if humanity would be willing to discuss the situation. Day 1 stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the stars. Not yet, they asked their question. They need to fully understand our answer first. Sir, some of them are terrified. They're calling it the Ghost Protocol, the Silent War. Rumors are spreading that humanity has technology beyond anything known. Good, Day 1 said simply. Fear born from misunderstanding can be corrected. Fear born from understanding the truth is wisdom. By the time we return to that chamber, they'll be ready to hear what we have to say. In the darkness of space, human ships continued their silent watch. Not attacking, not threatening, simply existing in places and ways that should have been impossible. The galaxy had asked who ruled the stars. Humanity was showing them that the question itself was flawed. Day 4 of the recess arrived with growing tension across the council station. The disappeared fleets had become the only topic of conversation. Some ships had reappeared in random locations, crews confused and frightened. Others remained missing, their fate unknown. Through it all, the human delegation remained quiet, going about their daily routines as if nothing unusual was happening. Yuno walked through the station's diplomatic gardens, a vast greenhouse that simulated environments from dozens of worlds. She had found that many delegates came here to think, to escape the pressure of the formal halls. Today she encountered a young Caltharian administrator sitting beside a pool of bioluminescent water. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Una said, sitting on a nearby bench. "Your homeworld has similar pools, I believe." The Caltharian looked up, surprised. "You know of Caltharia?" "I've studied many cultures," Una replied with a gentle smile. "Your people have one of the oldest continuous civilizations in the galaxy. 2 million years of recorded history. That's remarkable." The administrator relaxed slightly. "You're with the human delegation. The ones everyone is talking about. I am, though I'm just a cultural attach. I study how different species communicate and understand each other." Una watched the lights dance in the water. "Tell me, in all those millions of years of history, has your species ever faced a threat you didn't understand?" The Caltharian considered this. "Many times in our early history, there were periods we called the Silent Ages, when our ancestors encountered forces they couldn't explain. It drove them to develop better science, better understanding. And did they survive by fighting these forces, or by learning about them?" "Learning," the administrator admitted. "Our greatest strength has always been patience and study, not military power." Una nodded. "Wisdom that comes from experience. Your people have already learned what others are just beginning to understand." She left the Caltharian deep in thought and moved on to other encounters. Throughout the day, she had similar conversations with delegates from different species, never mentioning the disappearances, never speaking of military matters. Just discussions of culture, history, philosophy. Yet each conversation left her companions thinking differently about what was happening. Commander Sang-Woo sat in the cockpit of his long-range reconnaissance ship, the Morning Star, studying the holographic display before him. His vessel had been mapping the galaxy for 7 years, cataloging every military installation, every fleet movement, every strategic position held by the Council species. "Final sector complete," his navigation officer reported. "We now have comprehensive data on all 200 civilizations' military capabilities and positions." Sang-Woo reviewed the information with a practiced eye. "This is incredible. We know where every ship is, down to individual patrol craft. We have firing solutions for every defensive platform. Access codes for most communication networks. Sir, if I may ask, why did we spend so long gathering this information if we never intended to use it aggressively?" "Because understanding is its own form of power," Sang-Woo replied. "We don't need to fire a shot if we know exactly where every potential shot could come from. The data we've gathered isn't for attacking. It's for ensuring no one can attack us without us knowing about it long before it happens." He transmitted the final data package to Admiral Yoon Mi's command center. The complete picture of Galactic military power, gathered over years of patient observation, all coming together at this critical moment. Dr. B.O. Ra sat in her laboratory aboard the Council station, analyzing behavioral patterns from the past 4 days. As a xenanthropologist, her job was to understand how different species thought, how they reacted to stress, how their cultures shaped their decision-making. "The pattern is clear," she said to her research team via secure connection. "Species with longer histories of peaceful development are adapting quickly to the uncertainty. They're seeking understanding. But the younger, more aggressive civilizations are becoming increasingly erratic. Is that dangerous?" One of her colleagues asked. "Potentially. Fear makes people unpredictable, but it also makes them receptive to new information, if presented correctly. The Therosians, for example, have gone from arrogant certainty to genuine confusion in just 4 days. Their entire worldview was built on military superiority. Now they can't explain why their superior fleet was rendered helpless without a fight." Bod Ora pulled up charts showing stress responses across different species. Ambassador Day One's strategy is working. By not explaining what's happening, he's forcing them to question their assumptions. When he finally provides answers, they'll be in a mental state to actually listen. On the 5th day, the Vrelian Prime requested an emergency council session. Delegates filed into the chamber, the atmosphere completely different from the confident gathering 5 days earlier. Now there was nervousness, uncertainty, and for many, fear. The Vrelian Prime's crystalline structure pulsed with agitated colors. We must address the situation that has developed during this recess. Multiple species have experienced unexplained military disruptions. Fleets have disappeared. Communication networks have failed. And yet no formal complaint has been filed. No enemy has claimed responsibility. A Korthan delegate stood. We all know who is responsible. The humans are the only ones unaffected. This is clearly their doing. Day One sat quietly, making no move to confirm or deny the accusation. Hannah beside him continued reviewing data, seemingly unconcerned with the proceedings. If humanity is responsible, a more measured voice said, belonging to a delegate from the ancient Primus Collective, then we must acknowledge they have demonstrated capabilities far beyond what we understood. The question is, what do they want? The Therosian representative, noticeably subdued compared to 5 days ago, spoke carefully. Our fleet has reappeared in Therosian space. Every ship intact, every crew member unharmed. But none can explain what happened. Systems simply failed, then restored themselves. We found ourselves transported light years from our intended target, with no record of how we got there. The same happened to our reconnaissance vessels, added another delegate. No damage, no casualties, but complete loss of control for a period of time we can't even accurately measure. The Vrelian Prime turned its attention to Day One. Ambassador, will you address these events? Day One stood slowly. The council asked for patience. 2 more days remain in the requested recess. On the 7th day, all questions will be answered. That is unacceptable. A militant species delegate shouted. You have attacked multiple civilizations. This is an act of war. Show me 1 casualty. Day One replied calmly. 1 destroyed ship, 1 injured crew member, 1 planet damaged. If you can prove an act of war, present your evidence. The chamber fell silent. There was no evidence because there had been no violence, no destruction, nothing that could traditionally be called an attack. Hannah finally looked up from her tablet. Perhaps the question isn't what humanity has done, but what you all have done. Every species affected by these disruptions made aggressive moves during the recess. Every single one. Those who remained peaceful have experienced no problems whatsoever. Are you suggesting we brought this upon ourselves? The Korthan delegate demanded. I'm suggesting that actions have consequences, Hannah replied. You chose to test humanity's resolve through force. You received an answer to that test, just not the answer you expected. Later that evening, Yuna found herself in conversation with a group of younger delegates. Species who had only recently achieved interstellar travel. They were less invested in the power games of the ancient civilizations and more curious about the truth. What is humanity really like? One asked. We hear stories, but most contradict each other. Yuna thought carefully before answering. Humanity is patient. We learned long ago that the fastest way to solve a problem isn't always the best way. We spent centuries watching and learning before we ever revealed ourselves to the galaxy. We built our understanding slowly, carefully. But you must have weapons, another said. The power to do what's been happening. We have capabilities, Yuna acknowledged. But power isn't just about weapons. It's about understanding. It's about knowing when to act and when to wait. It's about asking the right questions. She smiled gently. The council asked who rules the stars. But maybe the better question is, do the stars need rulers at all? As the sixth day dawned, the mood on the council station had shifted dramatically. The arrogance and posturing of the first meeting had been replaced by uncertainty, and for many, a growing respect for what humanity had, demonstrated without ever making a direct threat. Admiral Yunmi reviewed the reports from across the galaxy. All operations proceeding as planned. No escalations beyond initial responses. Casualties remain at zero. The psychological impact has been significant, one of our officers reported. Multiple species are reconsidering their military doctrines. Some are calling for immediate diplomatic outreach to humanity. Good, Yunmi said. That's exactly what we needed. Fear is temporary, but respect based on demonstrated capability lasts much longer. When Ambassador Da-1 speaks tomorrow, they'll be ready to hear the truth. The seventh day approached, and the galaxy held its breath, waiting for humanity's answer to a question that now seemed far more complicated than when it was first asked. The seventh day arrived with a tension unlike anything the council station had experienced in its long history. Delegates filed into the great chamber, but the confident speeches and territorial boasts of a week ago were nowhere to be found. Instead, there was nervous silence as species that had threatened war now waited, anxiously to understand what had happened to them. Day one entered the chamber with the same calm demeanor he had shown throughout the recess. Behind him walked Hana, and joining them for the first time was Min Seo, a woman carrying what appeared to be a simple data storage device. Her presence drew curious stares, as she wore not a military uniform, but the simple robes of an archivist. The Vrelian Prime called the session to order, its crystalline structure pulsing with subdued colors. 7 days have passed. Ambassador Day 1, the Council awaits humanity's answer to our question. What does your species claim to rule? Day 1 walked to the center of the chamber, his footsteps echoing in the vast space. For a long moment, he simply stood there, looking around at the assembled representatives of galactic civilization. Then he began to speak. The council asked a wrong question, he said, his voice carrying clearly despite its gentle tone. You asked what humanity claims to rule, but claiming and possessing are very different things. You asked us to declare our borders, our territories, our dominion. You wanted us to draw lines on maps and stake our flags on worlds. He paused, letting the words settle. We declined because humanity learned long ago that true strength doesn't announce itself. True power doesn't need proclamations or declarations. It simply exists. The Therosian representative shifted uncomfortably. Then you admit you possess this power? That you were responsible for what happened to our fleets? I'll answer that question, Day 1 replied. But first, you need to understand what humanity has been doing for the past 800 years. He gestured to Min Isio, who activated the data device. Holographic displays materialized throughout the chamber, visible from every angle. What they showed made several delegates gasp. This is a complete map of a known galaxy, Min Isio explained, her voice calm and precise. Every star system, every planet, every strategic location. But these markers you see, the green ones, represent something specific. Places humanity visited before we ever made contact with the galactic community. The display zoomed in on different regions. Green markers appeared in thousands of locations, near every major wormhole, around resource-rich nebulae, at gravitational nexus points that controlled access to entire sectors. Strategic positions that military commanders would recognize immediately as critical to any defensive or offensive operation. We've been here the whole time, Min Seo continued. While you built your empires and fought your wars, humanity was quietly exploring, not conquering, not claiming, just watching and learning. A delegate from a scientific species spoke up, their voice filled with awe. This is impossible. Our own surveys never detected any human presence in these locations. Some of these sites are in deep space, far from any colony. Your surveys were looking for active settlements, Hana interjected, pulling up additional data. You weren't looking for small observation posts, automated monitoring stations, or ships running silent. Humanity developed stealth technology not to attack, but to observe without disturbing. We wanted to understand the galaxy before making ourselves known. The displays shifted again, now showing detailed schematics of defensive networks. Thousands of small satellites, barely larger than a person, positioned throughout space. Energy collectors that drew power from stars. Quantum communication nodes that allowed instant coordination across light years. What you experienced during the recess, Day One said, was a demonstration of systems we've had in place for decades. These networks can disrupt navigation, interfere with communications, disable weapon systems. All non-lethally, all reversibly. We built them not to wage war, but to ensure we would never need to. A new figure entered the chamber, an older man with kind eyes. This was Jae-hoon, and he wore the simple clothing of a civilian. He had been a soldier once, fighting in humanity's early wars before they reached the stars. Now he worked for peace. I want to address the fear many of you are feeling, Jae-hoon said, his voice gentle. You're wondering if humanity plans to use this power to dominate the galaxy. The answer is no, and I can prove it. He activated another display, showing the missing Therosian fleet. Your ships are currently in a stable orbit around an uninhabited moon in your own territory. Every crew member is healthy and unharmed. All systems are functioning normally. You can verify this right now by contacting them. The Therosian delegate immediately began working his communication device. Moments later, his expression shifted from suspicion to shock. It's true. They're there. They're reporting full operational status, but have no memory of the past 6 days. They were placed in a form of stasis, Hana explained. Time didn't pass for them normally. We transported them safely home while they were unconscious. It was the kindest option we had. This was done to 17 species, Jae-hoon continued. Everyone that made aggressive moves during the recess. And everyone will find their forces returned safely unharmed. We could have destroyed those fleets. We could have held them hostage. We could have demonstrated our power through violence. We chose not to because that's not who humanity is. The Vrelian Prime structure pulsed thoughtfully. You're saying you had the capability to end any of us at any point, but you chose restraint instead? Not just capability, Day One corrected. Opportunity. For 800 years, we've watched galactic politics. We've seen wars fought over resources that could have been shared. We've watched species destroy each other over borders that were arbitrary to begin with. We've observed the cycle of conquest and revenge repeat endlessly. He pulled up historical data, showing conflicts from across the centuries. We studied every war, every peace treaty, every rise and fall of civilizations. We learned what works and what doesn't. And we learned that those who rule through fear eventually fall. Those who rule through force create enemies. Those who claim dominion create resentment. So we chose a different path, Mincio added. We positioned ourselves not as rulers, but as guardians. We placed our observation posts at critical points, not to control them, but to ensure no one else could use them for aggressive purposes. We built our defensive networks to protect not just ourselves, but the balance of power in the galaxy. A delegate from a peaceful species spoke up. But you still wield enormous power. How are we to trust that you won't abuse it? You've seen our answer to that already, A1 replied. When tested, when attacked, when threatened, we responded without taking a single life. We had every justification to defend ourselves with lethal force. Instead, we demonstrated that we could protect our interests without violence. Jae-hoon stepped forward again. I've fought in wars. I've seen what happens when species believe might makes right. It creates a galaxy of fear and suffering. Humanity decided generations ago that we wanted something different. We wanted a galaxy where disputes are solved through understanding, not destruction. The displays changed once more, showing the extent of humanity's defensive capabilities. It was staggering. Energy barriers that could seal off entire star systems. Disruption fields that could disable any known weapons technology. Transportation systems that could move ships across vast distances. Detection networks that monitored every spacecraft larger than a shuttle. You could have conquered us all, a small species delegate said quietly. Why didn't you? Because conquest is temporary, Day One answered. Fear is temporary. True security comes from mutual understanding and respect. We didn't want to rule the galaxy. We wanted to ensure the galaxy could rule itself wisely. Hannah brought up the final piece of data. This shows every conflict in the past 200 years. Notice something interesting? The number and severity of wars has decreased dramatically. Species that might have gone to war instead negotiated. Territorial disputes that might have led to violence were resolved through diplomacy. You influenced these outcomes? Devrelian Prime asked. We ensured information was available, Hannah replied. We made sure diplomatic channels remained open even when tensions were high. We prevented sneak attacks by making it impossible to hide fleet movements. We created an environment where peace was easier than war, even if no one realized we were doing it. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity hadn't just been observing the galaxy. They had been quietly shaping it, guiding it toward better outcomes without ever announcing their role. You still haven't answered the original question, the Therosian representative said, though his tone was more respectful than challenging now. What does humanity claim to rule? Day One smiled slightly. Nothing. And everything? We don't claim territory because we understand that the stars don't belong to anyone. We don't claim dominion because we understand that true leadership means serving others, not controlling them. We claim only the responsibility we've taken upon ourselves to ensure that the galaxy has the opportunity to grow beyond its violent past. So what happens now? Asked a young species delegate. Do you reveal all your capabilities and continue as you have been? That depends on all of you, Jehum replied. The Council can choose to continue the path it was on, fighting over territories and resources. Or it can choose to work together, understanding that humanity's networks exist not to control, but to protect. We're willing to share our knowledge, our technology, our understanding, but only if the galaxy is ready to use them wisely. The session ended not with declarations or demands, but with questions. Real questions, born from genuine desire to understand rather than conquer. 3 months had passed since humanity's revelation to the Galactic Council. The chamber that once echoed with threats and territorial claims now hosted very different conversations. Representatives from 200 species gathered, not to draw borders, but to discuss cooperation. The change had been gradual, but unmistakable. Day One stood at a viewport in the station's observation deck, watching ships from dozens of civilizations dock peacefully. Beside him, the Vrelian Prime had requested a private conversation, its crystalline structure reflecting the starlight in patterns that indicated thoughtfulness. I must confess something, the Vrelian Prime said. My species has existed for 3 million years. We believed our age gave us wisdom, that our long history meant we understood the universe better than younger species. We were wrong. Not entirely wrong, Day One replied gently. Your species has great wisdom, but wisdom isn't just about how long you've existed. It's about what you've learned from that existence. Humanity forced us to ask better questions, the Vrelian Prime continued. We asked who should rule. You showed us that question itself was flawed. Now the Council debates not territories, but responsibilities. Not power, but purpose. It's uncomfortable for many of us. Growth often is, Day One observed. But discomfort is temporary. Understanding lasts. True to their word, humanity had begun sharing technology and knowledge with species that demonstrated peaceful intent. But it wasn't a simple transfer of power. It was a teaching process, ensuring that each civilization understood not just how the technology worked, but why it should be used responsibly. Yuna had become one of the primary instructors in this process. She now ran regular sessions where delegates from various species came to learn about human philosophy and approach to power. The technology isn't the important part, she explained to a group of younger civilizations. Any species can build weapons or defensive systems given enough time. What matters is the wisdom to know when to use them and when to refrain. A Caltharian student raised a tentacle. But how do you develop that wisdom? Your species is so young compared to most of us, yet you seem to understand these principles better. We learned through failure, Yuna answered honestly. Humanity's history is filled with wars, with civilizations that rose and fell through violence. We nearly destroyed ourselves multiple times. That pain taught us lessons we couldn't learn any other way. We don't claim to be better than you. We just learned certain lessons earlier because we made those mistakes first. Admiral Yunmi stood in her command center, which had transformed from a military installation into something more like a coordination hub. The defensive networks humanity had built still existed, but their purpose had evolved. Now they served the entire council, monitoring space not for threats to humanity, but for threats to peace itself. We're detecting a dispute in the outer rim, one of our officers reported. 2 species arguing over mining rights in an asteroid field. Send the information to both parties, Yunmi ordered. Show them the field contains enough resources for both civilizations to share. Provide calculations on efficient extraction that benefits everyone. Already done, Admiral. Both species have acknowledged receipt and are requesting mediation assistance. Yunmi nodded with satisfaction. This was the new pattern. Instead of military intervention, humanity provided information and support for peaceful resolution. The galaxy was learning to solve its own problems, with human systems ensuring everyone had access to the truth rather than propaganda or partial information. Captain Taeyang's ship, the Silent Echo, continued its mission of observation, but now it did so openly. Other species had come to recognize human stealth vessels not as threats, but as guardians. When one of his crew questioned whether this reduced their effectiveness, Taeyang had a ready answer. Our effectiveness was never about hiding from everyone, he explained. It was about being able to see the truth clearly. That hasn't changed. We still monitor, still observe, still ensure no aggressive species can launch a surprise attack. But now the galaxy knows we're here, and that knowledge itself prevents most conflicts. His sensor officer looked thoughtful. So the fear of what we might do has been replaced by trust in what we will do? Exactly. Fear is a tool, but trust is a foundation. Foundations last longer. On the council station, Ji-hoon worked with representatives from formerly aggressive species, helping them transition their military forces into defensive and exploratory roles. It was delicate work, as many officers had spent their entire lives training for conquest. Your skills aren't wasted, he told a group of Therosian commanders. You learn strategy, tactics, coordination. Those same skills apply to protecting trade routes, responding to natural disasters, exploring unknown regions. You don't stop being warriors. You just choose what you're fighting for. One Therosian, a veteran of many campaigns, spoke up. But we were taught that strength comes from domination, that the strong survive by crushing the weak. And where did that teaching lead you? Shi-Hoon asked gently. Your fleet was disabled without a fight. Not because you were weak, but because you were thinking about strength in the wrong way. True strength is building something that lasts, protecting rather than destroying, creating peace that allows everyone to thrive. The transformation wasn't universal or immediate. Some species remained suspicious of humanity's motives. Others resented the shift in galactic politics. A few continued to plot ways to gain advantage. But the overall trend was clear. The galaxy was moving toward cooperation. Hana had taken on a new role as coordinator between human systems and council operations. She found herself in constant communication with dozens of species, helping them understand the information humanity's networks provided. Why do you give us this data freely? A delegate from a resource-poor species asked during one meeting. You could charge for access, demand payment, or concessions. Because information isn't a finite resource, Hana replied. Sharing it doesn't diminish what we have. And a galaxy where everyone has access to accurate information makes better decisions, which benefits everyone, including humanity. But you still maintain control of the networks themselves. For now, Hana acknowledged. Eventually, we'll transition them to council management. But that requires the council to be ready for that responsibility. We're working toward that day, not preventing it. Min Seo continued her work as an archivist, but now she was documenting the transformation of galactic civilization. Future generations would need to understand how this change happened, what lessons were learned, what mistakes were avoided. This is the most important period in galactic history, she told her fellow historians. Not because of any war or conquest, but because of what didn't happen. Because species chose to step back from the brink and ask better questions. She was compiling a comprehensive record, including humanity's own history of conflict and growth. It was important, she believed, for other species to see that humanity wasn't perfect, had never been perfect. The power they wielded came not from superiority, but from hard-learned lessons. On a human colony world far from the council station, a child named Young Su sat in class learning about the galaxy. His teacher explained the different species, their cultures, their contributions to galactic civilization. Is it true we're the strongest? Young Su asked innocently. His teacher smiled. That's a complicated question. We have powerful technology, yes. But strength isn't just about technology. It's about wisdom, patience, and choosing to use our capabilities responsibly. Some might say the truly strong are those who have the power to dominate, but choose to serve instead. Young Su thought about this. So being strong means being nice? Being strong means being wise, the teacher corrected gently. Nice is good, but wisdom is better. Understanding when to act and when to wait, when to speak and when to listen. Those are the real measures of strength. The child seemed satisfied with this answer, though he couldn't yet fully understand what it meant. But one day he would, just as every generation of humanity had learned these lessons. Back at the council station, Day 1 prepared for his final address before returning to Earth. The council had voted to formally recognize humanity's role not as rulers, but as stewards. A position that came with responsibilities, but no authority to command other species. It's a good balance, he told Hana as they reviewed his prepared remarks. We maintain the networks that keep peace, but we don't dictate policy. We provide information, but don't make decisions for others. Some humans won't like that we're not in charge. Hana observed. Some humans still think in terms of dominance and submission, Day 1 agreed. They'll learn as the galaxy is learning. True leadership isn't about being in charge. It's about enabling others to make good choices. The final council session was nothing like the first. Instead of demands and threats, there were questions and proposals. Species offered to share resources, to combine their scientific knowledge. to work together on challenges that affected everyone. When Day One stood to speak, the chamber fell respectfully silent. "When we came here," he began, "you asked who ruled the stars. We gave you our answer through silence, and then through demonstration. Today, I'll give you our answer in words. No one rules the stars. No one should. The universe is too vast, too complex, too beautiful for any single species or group to claim dominion over it." He paused, looking around at the assembled delegates. "But that doesn't mean chaos. It means responsibility. Every species here has the capability to contribute to galactic civilization. Every species has wisdom to share, discoveries to make, perspectives to offer. Humanity's role is simply to ensure everyone has the opportunity to contribute. That aggressive species can't silence peaceful ones. That the strong can't prey on the weak. We're not your rulers," Day One continued. "We're your partners in building something better than what came before. The networks we built, the power we wield, they exist to serve that purpose. The day the galaxy no longer needs them, we'll happily shut them down. Until then, we'll continue our work, not in silence this time, but in open cooperation with all who share our vision." The applause that followed was genuine, warm. It wasn't the fearful respect of subjects for a master, but the appreciation of equals for someone who had shown them a better path. That night, Day One stood alone at the viewport again, looking out at the stars. They hung in the darkness, countless points of light representing infinite possibilities. Somewhere out there, young Sue and millions like him were growing up in a galaxy that had chosen peace over conquest. The question of who ruled the stars had been answered not with words, but with choices. Humanity's silence had spoken volumes, but their subsequent actions spoke even louder. They had demonstrated that true power lay not in domination, but in service, not in claiming territory, but in protecting peace. The stars needed no rulers. They only needed species wise enough to cherish them, patient enough to explore them, and humble enough to share them. Humanity had shown the way, not by declaring themselves superior, but by choosing to be something better than conquerors dot in the darkness of space. Human ships continued their silent watch, not as masters, but as guardians, not as rulers, but as partners in the endless journey among the stars.